Is this film?
It's in here.
All right, it's in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
That does show, we can go through those pictures kind of fast, and we'll come to a point where I can tell you when to stop, and then the film will start. We have to start it. That's, yeah, just go right on through. Get the pictures here.
What would probably work the best is we'll start talking, then when we get to is this mostly concentration camp pictures?
Those are, yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly.
And then what we could
There's
do.
a picture that I took right when I got out of my tank. But anyway, we'll keep on going slowly, and I'll tell you when to put your. Just keep on going. Now the next picture after that. Now, if we could, can you start that? Yeah, there. Now let's see if we get the picture. See if this computer will bring it in. Some computers don't bring it. But
Does it usually just go once I click on it?
yeah. We had to click on that woman's face, that journey, which you did.
Is it a video?
Yeah, it's supposed to be video, correct?
Yeah, it's right in there. It's a it's actually there. Now let's see. Yeah, no, you're not going to get it. That's
Ebonsea
see,
is a
but you're not
holiday
getting the
resort in
pictures.
Yeah.
Most computers will bring that up, but some computers just don't. So I don't know the reason why.
Now, is it?
When you just heard that man talk,
Is this the movie?
yep. Let's see, that other one is the original version. It should be the one that does it.
All right, let's try to click on that and see if that's.
Well, maybe. See what that does. There you are. Now, if you can click on her, you always just
If you
click on.
it'll play.
All right, there we
There
go.
we go.
Ebonsea
So that'll work then.
Yep, there.
is a holiday resort in the
Then we can
mountains.
turn the lights down so you can see this.
Yeah, so we'll do this. I think we'll
You-
start.
You can get it when you want it now.
Yeah, we'll be able to get it when we want it.
Okay, okay.
So,
We'll go back to where you saw me, at the very start.
very start
In my picture, yeah, with my,
right here.
that's me when I was I got in the Army in March '43, over at Camp Grant.
Okay.
I lived in Marengo at that time. But anyway, you don't need to, are we gonna have some children now to be here?
Well, we were supposed to have 2 kids. I apologize.
Yeah.
I don't know where they're at.
Well, that's okay.
So I do know me and Miss Noonan will be here. Mr. Johnson will be here for a little bit. So I know we're very interested in this. Part of the challenge that we're having is we've taken, me and Miss Noonan took it over here middle of the school year. And Mr. Johnson is going to be working with me next year on it.
Uh-huh.
So part of our issue is is the kids that we were dealt a hand, and we've been trying to deal the best we can with them. And I mean, this is basically we have a no show. So they're not, obviously it's not working out like we wish it would for whatever
Yeah,
reason
yeah.
this year. So I apologize about that. I thought they were here. We talked to one girl over and over. She said, I'll be there. Told her 2:40. Next year, we've handpicked our students so we don't have a moment like this. So we have 7 kids. What I could tell you, though, is I know I really want to hear your story.
Okay.
I think I'll get a lot out of it. I know Miss Noonan does. I know you came, taking time out of your day,
Oh,
so
no,
we
no,
still
that's-
want to do it right. And I apologize. I feel terrible about
That
this.
don't bother me a bit,
So-
the time of my day.
And then, I know because you came in a couple years ago how good you are talking and your story's great. So,
Yeah, I was in a different area, in the school then.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I apologize about
That's
that
okay.
again. I feel bad.
So what we're gonna do, you're gonna record this.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to record just like the last time you came in. we're going to record it, and then we'll probably have the kids next year. We have kids that we're going to get in the summer. Hopefully we get them in the summer, but definitely next year. And then we will have them edit your whole interview down as like one of the first ones that they do, being that you have so much good stuff, got a good story to tell. So that's how we're going to use it.
Well, that's, so if we could, shall we start off from this picture on, or you don't want any of my prior?
Yeah, we'll ask. We actually will start out.
You
We'll
gonna
take a
ask me
seat here.
questions?
Yeah, I got some questions. We'll let you go for the most part. I know you've done this a couple times, so you probably don't need us to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, I have done this, yes, but, yes, but basically, you know, just talk to classrooms. My goodness, I guess this, in the last month and a half, I've talked to 3 different schools.
What?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll get started here. So
Yeah, it's going.
we've got about an hour tape, so we're gonna have to stop you about an hour. We'll switch tapes, just so you're aware of that.
And we should be able to get
So-
through it in an hour, I think.
This water's for you.
Well, okay.
You need anything else?
No.
We got some ice cream we can get you at the end. A couple brownies, I think, still. A lemon bar,
No,
perhaps.
that's all right.
You gonna sit at the table, Nuna?
Well, yeah, I'll go on the side.
Okay.
Now, for pictures here, are you going to take pictures of this?
What we'll end up doing is, what we'll have the kids do is, since you brought that stick in, we could just save it as another file. So, and then we'll have that for them on our hard drive. So it won't come up on the camera, but we'll have access to it, if that's all right with you. If we take, like,
In other words, you want me to leave that stick here with
we
you?
don't even need to leave it. We'll just be able to save it as a
Oh,
different
okay.
file,
Oh, okay.
if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's what we'll do. That way, we'll see the images talking to you, and then the kids will have the images to go off of.
Yeah.
The key thing is getting your voice recorded.
Yeah.
Because what we'll try to do is, we tell them to use as many pictures and things of that nature as possible. So,
By going through this, I can talk from here on, my Army experiences before I ever left the United States. You want that?
well, let's just start with how you joined the Army and
How did I
why.
join the Army?
Don't do that, because it's
Oh.
trouble. Just so you know, keep your hands down.
We're recording now.
Yes.
We're good.
You're
I'm
good.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay. How I joined the Army? Well, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, we definitely knew we were in for quite a battle between Japan and Germany now, and so I lived in Marengo, Illinois at the time. I worked in a small factory. I had my mother and my 2 brothers were at home with me, the 4 of us, and I had an older sister who was out of state, so she was not living with us at that time. So I was kind of the breadwinner. My father died in 1939, and this is 1943. And we had struggled, and my uncle had, I should go back and tell you that I lived in northeastern Missouri, and that's where I graduated from high school. And we were on a farm then when my father died. And so my uncle, who lived in Marengo, was farming about 1,000 acres, and he wanted some help, and he thought he'd be doing us a favor by bringing us up and living on one of his the homes on his farms. So we did that, and we helped with the crops and things like that. But come fall, I got a job in Marengo in a little factory that's still there today. The boys are all leaving for service, and I knew I wanted to go. I wanted to do my part. And all of us did. Everybody wanted to get in the service. After they heard about the terrible bombings and the killings in Pearl Harbor. So my mother gave me permission to go. I could have gotten deferred because I was supporting the family, so to speak. two brothers had paper routes, done that, but didn't amount to much, but that was our only means of income. So I, and with two of the men from Marengo, came to Camp Grant on a cold, windy March day. And that was the first thing they'd done after they gave us uniforms and we got all set. They took our picture. And there I am, and at 19 and a half years old. I wanted to get in earlier. I'd like to have gone when I was 18 years old. But we just couldn't afford to do that. So from that time on, we were in Camp Grant about a week and a half, giving tests to assign us to different, either infantry, cavalry, whatever. And so I was put in an armored cavalry and was down in Camp Gordon, Georgia. At that time, we had troop trains running all over the United States, hauling men here and there. Of course, with no, you couldn't look out even though the windows, they had them all drawn, the shades were drawn. And there was a lot of concealment at that time because of Germany and Japan just going strong, and we had to have a lot of men in a hurry because we didn't have a good standing army. And when I got to Camp Gordon, Georgia, we went through our basic training, and right after basic training, we started, instead of using an actual rifle on a firing range or telling us how we would use a rifle, we were using just sticks, actually, just laths. And that ended soon, and we did get the old World War I rifle to learn how to fire and go on the rifle range for marksmanship. And then basic training was over with, and we started then, and I was in a tank unit, a tank company. The mechanized cavalry consisted of a lot of jeeps and armored cars and half tracks, and each vehicle had a lot of guns on it. We had a lot of firepower, and the tanks, of course, was a backup to help each individual troop in combat overseas. That's why we trained to be able to help our reconnaissance platoon that we assigned to any of them on their missions that they were given. So we then, after training in Georgia, we went on maneuvers in Tennessee on November of 1943 and December of 1943.
How long were you at Camp Grant for?
Camp Grant, I actually was there about a year. We went to the maneuvers in Tennessee for 90 days, November, December, and January of 44. So what that taught us all was to learn all of the tactical things that you would do for combat. And they had umpires, and the Red Army was fighting the Blue Army. There were thousands of men in 90-mile radius of Nashville. We tore down more farm fences, whatever. We just, of course, the government, of course, rebuilt all of that later. But we were there for those 3 months, learning how to live outside. And in Tennessee's weather was cold and damp, something like we've had today, the last few days. And then we'd get ice and sleet. So it was rough living. It wasn't desirable at all to live out there and that. But we learned how to live, and learning, as I say, tactical maneuvers. Umpires would declare either you were knocked out or you had won. And of course, we didn't have no live ammunition, but was just going where we went. It was decided by umpires. So anyway, we came back to Camp Gordon. Then we were shipped to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for 1 month's firing on our rifle ranges and all of the ranges, and also firing our heavy guns on the tanks for 1 solid month. And we lived outside again for that time. It was a time when we had to, now we were being told we were going to go into combat, and we really wanted to be expert marksmen, and we did. They were very good. I, for one, most all of us qualified for submachine guns and machine guns and rifle. We were all experts. You just had to be. Then we went back to Camp Gordon to get ready with moving out with everything we had to go to Camp Shanks, New York, to get ready to go overseas. We took our physicals there, and we were there for a couple weeks. We got on a big British ship called HMS Scythia was the name of that ship. It would hold, I think we had about 6,000 troops on it. And it was the last big convoy going across. There was close to 100 ships in that convoy. Not just, it was destroyers and submarines and all of that for protection. And the third day out, that big ship lost one of its motors. The diesel engines quit, so it slowed the whole convoy down. It took us 13 days to go from New York to Liverpool, England. And then after getting off, we had to wait in the harbor there to unload for about a week, with all of these ships taking time to get troops off. Of course, you couldn't get off until trains could move you. It was a long procedure. So we did finally get on a train in Liverpool, the whole regiment, and we went to Southampton, England. That's where all of the boys shipped out to go across the channel. We were about a month in. Once we got to Southampton area, we were now in a staging area, getting ready to go across the channel. We done a lot of calisthenics, everything to stay in good physical shape, and we were in good physical shape. We also got all of our everything was brand new. We got new tanks, everything, and of course we had to clean what they call cosmoline, a type of lubricant that was all over in the gun muzzles. Anything that worked would get rusty by being shipped over and handled. And so we had to get that ready, and we had the extra wheel put on the wheel. The tanks have roll-on wheels. The wheels roll on tracks, and so we used to put a extra wheel on the front slope plate of the tank. We had to have that welded on, and such things as that. We finally were ready to ship over, and we got on LSTs. That's a landing ship tank. That's what those LST means. It would hold 64 tanks, as I remember, or 64 big vehicles. So we landed on Utah Beach on August the 7th, 2 months and 1 day after D-Day, which was June 6, 1944. General Patton's Third Army went into Europe to France at that time.
Now, before, D-Day happens 2 months prior to you
2
landing.
months prior and 1 day prior.
Did you guys know the full, did you have an idea of how big of a event that was at that time?
Oh, yes. Because even when we were shipping across we got close to England, we heard all the details of what was going on radios, and announcements that's coming from the ship, from what they heard, where the troops were, and what the casualties were, and all of this. And when we got in, General Patton's 3rd Army, we were attached to the 20th Corps of the 3rd Army. I think there was 3 corps, the 20th, the 12th, and the 8th Corps, I believe was the 8th Corps. Anyway, our first engagement was at St. Lo. The Battle of St. Lo was just about over. I know we got off the ship on the 7th, along towards evening time, and they knew where we were going and towards the front, and so we did stop and spend the night in an area that had recent combat in it. The smell of death was everywhere. There were dead animals, horses, cattle, wrecked vehicles, wrecked American vehicles, German tanks knocked out. It was just you knew then, now you were getting into something that was the real thing. Everybody was apprehensive. Of course, you were scared right then and there, and you weren't there even to battle yet, but that's just a natural thing. When we got to our first engagement, I know we were to go down, there was hedgerows in that area, and so we went down the road with firing our guns and not knowing where the Germans were, that the infantry or the Germans used those hedgerows for camouflage and concealment, and so we simply just kind of mowed the area as we went towards this little village on the outskirts of St. Lo area, and at that time there was a roadblock. We could see that trees had been blown up and across the road. We simply got to that area and then started getting our first mortar fire coming in on us. We simply just moved out and we bypassed that. We went through woods, and the German resistance was very, very light at that time, but that's why they put the roadblocks up and blew up the trees with what they call primer cord, wrapped it around the trees and the explosive, and they can make the tree fall wherever they wanted it to. So that's what they've done everywhere. Quite often you run into those roadblocks like that. So everybody at that time, that was really nothing compared to what we were going to run into. So we continued we're driving the Germans, we were retreating. Now that wasn't on account of our 3rd Cavalry Regiment. It was because all of the 3rd Cavalry was moving with all the armor, and that's what we done, reconnaissance for the armor and infantry. That was our reason for being there. Any reconnaissance unit had to go out and find the enemy. And we done that all the way through for the next year. That's what we'd done until the war ended. Well, it wasn't a year, it was 9 months.
How long did it take to get through the hedgerows?
Oh, we got out of them in a short time. Actually, like I said, the Germans then were retreating, and we encircled the German army, really, and they suffered a lot of casualties. But they did get back it took us 39 days to get across France, over to the big city of Metz. Now, the Moselle River and the Siegfried Line, the Maginot Line, all are in that area. So that was September. then we had, it was hot through August, but then the climate changed. We started getting rains and rains and rains, and nearly every day it was either cloudy or rainy, and when it rained, it just was terrible. It was constant rain. It got so that it was so muddy that we put extensions on our tank tracks so that they wouldn't mire down so much. We call them duck bills. But we done that whenever you weren't on the front. If you were an outpost, of course, we couldn't do that there, but we were at a standstill. There's a big fort in the Maginot Line called Fort Driant. That was probably the biggest around Metz. It was built in 1869. Underground, tremendous amount of cement. That Maginot Line, it was part of the Maginot Line, which I later, in 1990 and 1995, I got to go through the Maginot Line, starting from up in the Luxembourg area, across over where the Siegfried Line and the Maginot Line run parallel there. You could had a railroad track, just small railroad tracks, and pulled with it was either gas or electric, because I rode in the rear of this train as we went through it, but they had all of the gun emplacements were underground, and you went up and they moved, they could raise up and fire and then bring the guns down. However, the pillbox part of it was still there, but they controlled that. It was an amazing thing, but the Germans overcome, but they went in from up north and got behind the Maginot Line, and it was worthless. So the Germans took that over, and so they were in Fort Driant, and that was down in the big woods, heavy woods. They were on, that was high on the high ground, and we were down in the low ground. The 5th Infantry Division, the 90th, I believe, Infantry was all getting ready to take the big city of Metz, that area. Not the city so much as the surrounding area. But for days, we couldn't do nothing. We could not actually conquer anything, because there we were mired down. The infantry division, the 5th Infantry Division, suffered a lot of casualties there when they did have an all-out attack. I saw a lot of action there from our P-47 bombers, fighter planes dropping 500-pound bombs on this fort and not doing nothing to it. So it was one of the big things where the Germans had control the whole area with those big forts in the Maginot Line. Eventually, we got Metz captured around the 16th or 15th of November. And then our unit, we had to, of course, was back on reconnaissance again, and we crossed the Moselle River, and we entered Germany on the 17th of November. It was the first, we are, in our history of books, we were the first American units to cross into Germany of the 20th Corps of the Third Army. So we had that distinction. But now it was a lot of major skirmishes. We were shelled a lot with artillery, the big German guns. A lot of casualties. We suffered casualties, vehicles knocked out. However, if we could not overcome, we always just simply bypassed, went around the flanks, and kept going. It got so we were in German territory more than we were in our safe American territory. We were out behind the lines most of the time.
You guys specifically, because you were reconnaissance?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we were trying to find out, where the Germans were, what the roads were like. how strong the bridges were, if we could cross it with tanks and things like that. All of that was reported back to headquarters.
So, is it accurate to say that you guys typically in a more dangerous spot because of that?
Well, you're the eyes and ears of the whole, of armored divisions and infantry divisions behind you.
It sounds like I don't know, it reminds me of Civil War cavalry. I mean, that's, you know.
That's exactly what
the-
if you've seen the old Western movies,
Yeah, the definition of cavalry.
that's
seems like
exactly what we
were.
do. So then we got into the cross the Moselle River into the Siegfried line. That's a German line. Now, I don't know if that's ever been described to you or not, but
Dragon's teeth.
Hitler was where he got the crazy idea that he should have cement embankments in the ground. At the base of them were probably 3 to 4 feet in a pyramid type thing, staggered from this wall to possibly behind you yet, and all the way, just like a bunch of. So you could not drive, of course, that would. But if there's a little town that you had to go through to get in to cross the Siegfried line, there were 2 big guns protecting that entry into the towns or the villages. Then, after beyond that, first thing then was slave labor. In 1938, started digging when they started this Siegfried line, a trench, a wide trench, so that you would have to fall into that and then come out to get across. So it was impossible just to drive a vehicle across. It was, of course, it stopped. But General Patton laughed at that thing. He says, all we'll do is fill it over, put dirt, and we'll drive right over it. And that's exactly what they done. If you couldn't enter. Now, we entered into town of Tettingen, Germany, I should say, after the 14th or the 20th Armored Division came up through a little town of where we were at, Wackern, Germany, 1 mile from the Siegfried line, in the town of Tettingen. It was along sloping hills where they could take their tanks up, but the mud was so soft. But they had the big medium tanks, and they were going to make an advance and take that town that one particular day. And we had told them, because we had been on patrol, night patrol and day patrols, we did a lot of that. And we saw what was there, and we knew exactly how it had to be. We weren't going to go any further. We knew what was there, and I remember that we tuned in on their channel, the radios, and we listened to this as they approached to go over the knoll. They got within 200 yards of those 2 88 millimeter guns. And that particular morning, within a half hour, there were 14 of those big Sherman tanks, our tanks, completely destroyed. And then, these, of course, the armor-piercing round from that gun would go right through the front slope plate of the tank and out the back end. You could see right through. They knocked out these, and I'll never forget those poor guys in those tanks screaming for all the help they could get. And one man I heard telling that he put his tourniquet on his legs, but you couldn't stop the bleeding. And oh, that was just terrible. The next day, or that particular night then, the 135th Engineer Battalion got into those 2 forts where those guns were and blew them up with a torpedo that they could do that with. And how they done it, I'll never know, but they destroyed those 2 88 millimeter guns that night. So that next day, we went to help retrieve with the maintenance crews, and the tank retrievers were sent up to get those tanks and those bodies out of those tanks. And of course, they all burnt a fire, flame. They burn up, most of them. It was a terrible thing, and we told our captain, my captain, I heard him tell this colonel not to go over that hill. He said, we'll do it. And I don't know why he did that, but he was told what was there. But that's what could happen if you didn't. But that happened, and I'll never forget that particular town, because we did go into that town then. And
What
we
was
out,
the name of that town?
Tettingen is the way I pronounced it, Tentingen, something like that. That's what we all called it. So we did get into that town, but the German infantry was on the end of the, probably 200 yards down the street. We went into and got into this corner house. There was no civilians in the town then. And we had tanks, we had roads leading out. We outposted the whole, our side of the town. And we called this street, if you opened the door and tried to walk out of that house, we called it the bowling alley because they just let loose with the machine gun fire. And there was a house on the end, it was at a T, and we were on the end of the T, the side. So we were in the basement mostly because the artillery fire, mortar fire, they had mortars. It wasn't our big artillery, it was mortar fire. They were blasting at us all the time with that. If you moved, they threw mortar in on you. But it's that particular one that night, that night or the second night, I had to move my tank with my driver to a different street and to outpost for the night. We had members of our crew would stay in the tank, and so they done that just to any patrols or whatever if they were coming. So we moved the tank. We just got outside, and it was getting dark, cold. And we run across the road on the opposite side of the road to get to our tank and got in. And just as we were starting to get in, mortars came in. And this is when I got hit on the back of my hand when I was getting up on the tank. And I got mortar, it just shrapnel hit me on the back of this hand. It's not. It was nothing deep, but it tore this open, and then my side guy cut my side. That's my only injury for the whole thing that I went through. But that's what happened with a lot of us. You never knew what the day would be when you get up in the morning, or what you'd do all day long, and the missions that you had to go on. Because General Patton didn't let you sit around, you moved towards the enemy, and he was there to win the war. One of the greatest generals that ever lived, as far as I'm concerned. A wonderful man. So anyway, then come the Battle of the Bulge. I have some statistics here of the Battle of the Bulge.
Before you get into that, I'm sorry, just one.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit about dealing with the fear?
With the what?
Like how you cope with the fear, how you deal with it? Because I know guys, just based on what I've learned,
Sure.
is that everybody sort of does it a little bit differently. I mean, everybody's always scared.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So if you could just talk about that a little
Well,
bit.
we go back to the hedgerows that first day. Now, we buttoned our tanks up. In other words, we were using periscopes, but I wasn't. I was the tank commander, and I sat in the turret, and I observed my hatch was open. And this fellow that was firing his machine gun, it's a gun, a 30 caliber machine gun by the muzzle of your 30, that was a 37 millimeter on the M5 tank. It was a machine gun called a coaxial machine gun. And He was firing that. He pulled on my leg because he was down here. And I just got down. I knew he meant something. And he talked on the radio. We all talked. We had, you could have the strap around here, and you didn't have to have a mic or nothing on. We just had to run. And he pulled me down, and just as I got down to look through my periscope, it hit me in the face, the bottom of it, all come back and hit me. So what had happened is the machine gun had jammed. So we simply opened up the cover latch, got it ready to pull the shell out, and got it so it was in operation order again. And then I looked at it. Well, I looked in my periscope, and it was all I couldn't see nothing. It was shattered up on top. I opened it, pulled it down, and put a new head on it. That was you could do that. That's the way they were made. I slipped it back up, and there's a little cover that covers that, spring-loaded, so to keep rain out and for the weather. Well, there, my bullet went right through that cover and knocked it and hit the periscope and shattered that. Now, had that, somebody was with me, or otherwise I would have had that bullet right back here, right through my head. There was a sniper in the tree, and I was in his sights, and for that, this happened. I had to get back down in. So, it scared me so. I thought, my, we got to go all the way to Berlin, and this, just my thoughts. It scared me to death. Yep. But I guess, you got to do something like that. It's hard to face that. We went through infiltration course here in the States where you crawl on the ground, and just above your head, a foot above your head, was nothing but light ammunition from machine guns shooting right across your. So you had to stay down to learn what that, and the sound of that, and to try to get accustomed to people firing at you. And this never could be done. I was scared everywhere I went, even on my last final mission up to this concentration camp. And we all went that way. But that's why you now are so far away from any other help. Everything back home is gone. You're not even close to those folks. You can't holler for help from home. And so that's why there was such a thing, I think. We never called it a band of brothers, but we were just close as could be. Very close. I lost a lot of good, wonderful friends. Killed, injured, wounded, never came back. They're horrible sights of war. But anyway, then comes the Battle of the Bulge. Now it's December 16th, and it's cold, and it's been snowing, and it's now getting very cold. So we were assigned, General Patton pulled 4 armored divisions up from the south, from this 3rd Corps up to Bastogne area. We were on the right flank of that. As we were driven back, we were on the right flank. We never got in on the Battle of Bastogne. We were 40 miles away. But then we got to be closer to that. Probably 20 or 2015 when we started driving the Germans back. I found these statistics. There were many casualties on both sides. There were 600,000 troops engaged in that battle. And this was the largest battle that the American Army had ever been in. The Germany had 20 or 30,000 deaths and 40,000 wounded and 40,000 taken prisoners. The United States, we had 20,000 killed, 40,000 wounded, and 20,000 taken as prisoners. In just that a month's time. And you think about D-Day, where the first half hour killing 3,000 of us. In comparison to the wars today, there's nothing like that. After we were really driven back, when the snow and the cold, it was terrible. You couldn't stay in a tank overnight if you didn't have an engine running and have a heat. There was heaters in the tank, but you would freeze to death because it was temperatures as low as 18 below zero for about 3 days, 15 to 18 below zero. Now you're out here in this snow and that kind of weather with ordinary. We didn't have combat boots, or what our combat boots we had were just regular shoes, ankle high, then with the straps sewed on, riveted onto them that you could buckle, and that was the kind of a boot it was. So that was your protection. Finally, after the Battle of the Bulge, we got some called shoe packs, like something like today's are so much better, but those were so much warmer. So there was so much trench foot. Oh, terrible. Can you imagine trying to stay alive and weather, just to conquer the weather? So I can only say the only reason we ever done that was because we were in such good physical shape. Never, I could never stand that today. The ordinary person couldn't, I don't think. So it was a terrible, terrible thing. I just can't tell you how severe that was. Finally, we got the Germans on the retreat. And then we rode across, got to the Rhine River. That's a big river, a fast-moving river. And near Frankfurt, Germany, a town called Mainz, and we crossed that on pontoon bridges. The Germans had blown up the bridges across the Rhine and in that area. But we got across there, and now the Germans were disorganized because they'd lost all of these men. A big loss. Hitler gambled, and all he had was small remnants of his army left. And the Russians coming from the other side. So the pincer movement was on. So we got going kind of like we broke through their lines. They were in these towns trying to protect their home country, fighting hard. And like we all would if some people were here in the United States trying to overcome you. And so we broke out, and we didn't use the roads. We went across fields, woods, whatever. That was the cavalry. I'm talking about reconnaissance. That's what we did. And so next thing you know, we had everything rolling. And so we were on the way towards Berlin, really. The whole Third Army was moving very fast. We went as high as 150 miles a day. And it was just going like we couldn't be stopped when there was nothing in front of us. But you come to a little town that if there was resistance, you just went around it and went on. We got to the big city, or not a big city, but the city of Schementz. And there we held up and we're told now we've got to go south and east. We wouldn't go for Berlin. The big three had decided to let the Russians capture Berlin, and we would go towards south and east to meet the Russians at the Elbe River. So we did that. We got near the Czechoslovakian border. The next thing you know, we're now in Austria. And now, maybe we should have the pictures on if you want to see them, and I can
Yeah.
talk about.
Probably move it.
This would actually be a good time to switch tapes.
We're gonna switch tapes.
Sure.
This is great. I mean,
You got another tape?
yeah. Over here.
Well, you know, here, there, the next picture,
Yeah, wait, that's-
this is my tank. If you, the lights are here, if you could just dim the lights, you'd see a little more. There.
Are we all right?
It's, yeah, because we're not gonna be looking at him when he's talking about the pictures anyway, so.
This is a picture of my tank, and if you look up there on the turret, is it Lady Luck, my driver, who actually sit right behind where I'm standing. I sit up at the top where the top is, that's where I was sitting in the turret as a commander. The driver was behind me there, and the assistant driver was on the other side. So my driver, he says, well, he done that, he put that on there as soon as we got that tank. We got rid of the M5 tank after the Battle of the Bulge. We get this tank with a 75 millimeter gun. And so he says, we're gonna name the tank, and so he did that. He was a wonderful man. And the gunner, there was a gunner there, and the man that loaded the gun, and myself, so there was 5 of us in the tank. As you can see, it's scarred up a little bit, and we never worried about that. We got through woods and this and that. We you know, it just happened. Well, let's go to the next picture. Now this, of course, now I've told you about crossing the Rhine, and here we now going south and east on the Autobahn, which is a much better highway than 90 is out here. You can go on that thing. I don't know what they use for cement, but they use good products. That's what I'd say. My captain, who I visited with in New Jersey 10 years ago, he passed away since then. But he said, Bob, I got a picture when I got there. He said, I want you to look at this picture, and this is your tank. He says, because I put it under a magnifying glass, and I can see your tank there, Lady Luck's. And if I'll get up and I'll point that out.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see right
I can see
here?
it.
What I
Yeah.
showed you?
Yeah.
There it is. And here we are. The 3 of us are in the tour. I'm sitting down. I'm on the right as we're looking at it. You can see. And then there's 2 guys, the gunner and the loader. What this is, we're going, the regiment is now moving fast, and this, we had little Piper Cubs for our artillery spotting. So they were flying with us. He evidently took this picture of his column going. And so Captain Brennan gave me that picture. He said, Bob, I want you to have that because I pointed it out. There's your tank. There's the arrows pointing toward the name. And I just want you to have that picture. So we were really moving down towards, let's go to the next picture. Now we're going down to crossing the Inns River. We're now leaving Germany, going into Austria. This now is the latter part of April. Yeah, it's about this time. And that town is Braunau, Austria. Adolf Hitler was born there in that town. So, as you can see, in the next picture, you'll see our tank. Let's go to the next one. There's our tank again. Us 3 guys are sitting right there and that's my tank, and we're gonna go across, as you can see, and that's just pontoon laid there, pontoons next, side by side, and then they put the tracks across. That's how you cross. The Rhine River was, oh gosh, maybe 4 to 5 times as wide as that. But that's a fast-moving stream there in that Inns River. So now we're in Austria. Let's go to the next picture. And here we are. This is now May 6th. May 5th, we had been going prior, a week, 3 or 4 days before, from 1st of May, or maybe the latter part of April, Germans were surrendering to us as we come down these highways and the roads. And they all were trying to surrender to the American army because they didn't want to be captured by the Russians. We're not far from the Russians here. And so, however, on the 5th of May, that particular day, we ran into a bunch of Hungarians. There was about 1,200 of them, a small group with mostly infantry, but they did have anti-tank guns. We engaged them. One of our tanks in my platoon got hit and knocked out and killed 2 of the crewmen. The rest were injured badly. But they survived, and at least one of them is alive today. I know him. It's a town called Volkelbruck. It was approximately 25 miles. This lake is running north, basically running north into a town, pretty big town called Gmunden. Now that's not the way that they pronounce it, but it's Gumden. And Volkelbruck was just a few miles out of there, and that was it. And so that after that firefight that we got into, we stopped in Gmunden. The next morning, I got with my platoon. I was to follow a reconnaissance platoon into this town, and our mission was simply to come to this town and outpost it, and wait till the war ended. Because this now is the 6th of May, and we know it's going to be over. We got into this beautiful, beautiful little town. And that picture doesn't tell it all. You just have to see it to believe what it is. I must tell you that all the streets in southern Germany and Austria, they're so clean. You can't imagine how clean they are. And they wash them streets. They just take care of the little towns. They have so much pride in the streets leading in the country roads. There's no weeds, no garbage, no all of the stuff that we see here by the side of the road. There is no such thing. It's just they didn't do that. They still don't do it today. So we got into this town, and there was a main part of this going kind of up this way is a hotel. And the captain, after they came in later, he said, we're going to stay here, and we're going to, till the war's over, and this is where we'll be. And he told the operators of the hotel that we were going to be there and just take over the building. So they didn't offer no resistance. Why? How could they? And we didn't. We were treated right. So our company took over the hotel. It was called the Hotel Post. We no more got into there, and then we heard the civilians then told us of a concentration camp up in the mountains. So let's go to the next picture. There you see, it's 2.5 miles up. Here is a guard tower. You can see that. And barracks, that's just everywhere. That's a barracks in buildings to help outpost buildings that contained a little of this and that and everything. But basically, there were 18,000 prisoners in that camp. Now we go to the next picture and see what we got here. there, as you see, is all these pine trees. That is a barracks right there. And it's just filthy, absolutely filthy. As we go on to the next picture, this is called the roll call square. By the roll call square, that is every person had to get up. They started as early as 4:30 in the morning, making men come out and stand 5 wide, 5 deep. And now this goes on a ways, but this is where we pulled our tanks, just about in this area when we come through the gates. But
Now, before you pull in, how much knowledge of concentration camps did you guys have?
what?
How much knowledge did you have?
Oh, well, I should tell you, we heard about Buchenwald. We didn't know anything about them. We run in and had heard about Buchenwald in the Stars and Stripes. That was a newspaper put out for the Army, and I read about it. We read about that, and we said, we don't want to ever run anything like that now. We hope we don't have to run into that, because they described it very well. The amount of deaths, what you saw. So, as we got into the town of Evansville about 11:30, that particular morning of May 6th, we heard about this. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was called into we called it the command post, CP, and I was given instructions of what I should do. I was to take my tank and another tank of my platoon and go up there, because our jeeps, this reconnaissance, the guys like would be the horses if you were compared it to horse cavalry. That's exactly what they did. They run up there, they saw this, they returned down and reported that. And so our regimental commander, our squadron commander rather, he said that we won't go up there with just the light stuff. They want to take a couple tanks up there and see what's up there. And of course we had the firepower with a 50 caliber and 230 caliber machine guns and a 75 millimeter high explosive rifle. So he wanted us to have some protection rather than send somebody up there and out in the open. So we got up and we started off up this. Now it's a nice blacktop road, but there it was just a gravel road all the way up, and we went slowly. We saw some prisoners that had escaped and going down in some open ground, but we didn't know what would happen. But we got about 150 yards from this entrance to this camp. We had to make a right-hand turn, and when we turned, I saw this, looked down the road, and I saw all of this, saw the fences, the barbed wire fences, those pine trees. It looked like a bunch of ghosts standing there. And they, of course, they knew they were, the Germans had the SS, the stormtroopers, the meanest men on earth, were there, and they had left on a Saturday before. We got there at Sunday noon. They left Saturday noon. In the meantime, there was people. Hitler had what was called the Volkssturm, older men like I am now, and young children, to guard the little villages throughout Europe, and they give them a rifle and a bazooka. So they were called the Volkssturm, and there were a group of them at the front gate. I wondered why they were standing there, and we peered down to those poor people standing in filth, no clothes on, some of them with no clothes, some with just the trousers, some with just the tops, standing in that filth, ankle deep, some with shoes, some with wooden shoes, some with nothing, just standing there. The stench was so bad, you could smell it, like I say, about 150 yards away from the gate. We could smell it, just the smell of death was just sickening. We got there, they were so excited and jubilant. They were just so thrilled to see us. Old Volkster, and one guy standing right beside my tank. I wasn't paying no attention to them because they weren't doing nothing. He had his rifle in his hand. I just reached down and picked the rifle up, and I simply, because I was up in my turret in my tank, and there was you'll see it as we go later in the picture, there's an arch gateway there, and there was a light hanging out on there, and that bracket for the light, I just hung it by the sling of the rifle and broke it over the gun of our tank, and those people roared like you. But anyway, they were all singing international songs, and so it's cheering, so just to see us. They saw that beautiful white star on our front slope plate, and they knew they had never seen anything like that. So let's go to the next picture. This is taken about 3 days later. This is some of the prisoners. Let's go to the next picture. Here is also about 2 or 3 days later. Here's these young boys. Now they're in good physical shape compared to the older. And so many of them just skin and bones, much worse. Some of them, you know, they were weighing 75, 80 pounds. Hardly able to walk. They just starved to death. But anyway, we pulled into the roll call square, as they called it. We found that out later. And we started passing out all the rations we had in our tank. We had probably enough rations for our crew to feed on for at least a week. And some of those poor people got the treat of the day, the month, the years that they'd been there. We couldn't stand the smell. We were ready to, we knew there was no resistance. We were ready to go back. And just report there was nothing up there but a bunch of starving people. Half of them ambulatory, and the rest lying in these barracks. Now let's go to another picture here. There is some inside of barracks. I must tell you about this boy right here. George Havis is his name. He worked for the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. He came to one of our Army reunions in Louisville, Kentucky, back in maybe 1990. He had heard about us, and he had tried his darndest to find out who I was or where I lived, and we corresponded later. And I met him. I met him over at the camp, and I met him at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. He took me through that museum in Washington. So his hairline, I can always remember his hair in those other pictures of him. He's kind of bald through here. But anyway, that's George Havis. So let's go to the next picture. There you see, up in that mountains and that fog, you can see it's just not a clear picture, but here these guys are heating something. I don't know what, they've got something. And there you see, that man back there is not even with nothing on. No clothing. It's high up there and it's very cold, chilly. Let's go to the next picture. And they're right there by the fire. There's part of them, and that's we saw in the previous picture there. Next. Now, when I got out of my tank, let me tell you about we give all these people everything we had, and they're just screaming, and I couldn't understand a word whatsoever. But all of a sudden, down to my right was a man that says, I lit up a cigarette, a Lucky Strike. We were all given cigarettes in our rations, but and you needed something to calm your nerves, and so I just lit that cigarette up. He saw the package, the little package. He says in English, "It's been a long time since I've had a Lucky Strike." I looked down to the man. And I said, "Did I hear you speak English?" "Yes." So I said, "Come up." And he got up on their tank. And he was in pretty good shape. He was able to crawl up with the help of the rest of them boosting him up a bit. And he took a puff of I lit a cigarette for him. And he took a puff of that cigarette, and he just about went down. He collapsed. And finally revived, he come to, and he didn't want no more of that cigarette. And then I started asking him questions, and he told me about it. He said, "Well, come down, get off, and thanks, let me take you around. I know, I'll show you everything in this camp." Well, we talked on the radio, both crews. And, well, we didn't want to get down amongst that mess, because these poor people, filth, sores all over them, and on their arms, on their faces. It's just, it was a terrible sight, and the smell, the stench. And we saw some bodies. Now, these bodies laying out in that filthy roll call square area were just torn apart. Well, this is gruesome, but that's what it was. And so immediately found out from him that those bodies were people who were called capos. They were the collaborators with the Germans, or the SS men, to control the barracks and report anybody that was out of line. Because that man he was done away with. He just didn't dare do that. But those were the guys that squealed on him, so to speak. And being there was nobody there, they literally got them guys and killed them that way. And so we got down. We finally decided to go get off and walk in all of that filth to the barracks, or kitchen first. Went to a kitchen. Had very clean utensils. The whole kitchen was clean. It was the German way. That's everything they done was spotless. I couldn't imagine being like that after walking through all this. And there was nothing in there, no food, nothing but those kettles and things. Big kettles were hanging on the walls, utensils of all kind. We walked through there, and he said, "Now we'll go to the barracks," and we went to a barracks area, and I'm telling you, the stench was so bad coming out of there. And we walked through, the men with lying there on the bunks. Their eyes wouldn't follow you. They were just staring into space. And a lot of them they were dying. And the others would wave, and they would recognize you, and we got out of there. We couldn't. So we thought, this is enough. He said, "No, you must go through this crematorium." So we did. There was bodies piled up outside of the walls. And this picture here is what I took. And that one of my crewmen there. I took that picture. We all shared the pictures that we took. That's why we have so many. Golly, we were there for a week and a half, almost a little better, 2 weeks. And so we all had pictures. But let's go to the next picture. And there, you saw it over here. There's that same picture. Those bodies were piled there, and another pile all the way around the 3 walls. And on the 4th wall had the furnaces where they burnt them. And these were lying there, ready to be burned. They were burning it around the clock and couldn't keep up. These bodies were from we're collected here. Let's go to the next picture. There's one of the furnaces. It says there, combustion furnace in the crematorium taken by a U.S. soldier, dedicated to Max Garcia. Garcia was a man that I give the cigarette to. There's a long story behind that, but let's go to the next picture. There, you see that man with the helmet on, the tank helmet, that's my driver. This is the other guy that's in our company. His name's Zakowitz is who he was. And that's Bill Butts, the guy, the driver. But there they are, bringing in the bodies from around the camp. Every Friday, they collected these bodies and put them on wagons. There's wagon load after wagon load of bodies. They died at the rate of 300 to 400 a day. And there they are, taken up, bringing up to the crematorium to be piled up, to be burned. I must tell you that all of us, all 10 of us guys, we were crying, we were sick, and some of them vomited going through this crematorium. We had seen enough. We had seen terrible scenes before we ever got to this camp, but nothing like this. There's so many stories I could tell you and go on and tell you about this, our experiences there. But let's go to the next picture. There's some more. How they could handle those bodies and pick them up was beyond me, the way people handle those. Let's go to the next picture. I think it's some more Americans, a couple Americans there. Oh, that's still one of the wagons. And that is a crematorium chimney there that you see. That's a chimney. Had you gotten to see this film, it would have showed this, the whole thing, a much better view, and then seeing all of these people inside, what they looked like, what we saw. Let's go on to the next one. That's more, probably, I don't know if that's the same wagon load or not, but they had wagon load after wagon load of bodies being brought up. And it's constant. And that, now we're at the outside of the camp. That's just outside of the camp. And the next picture would have been, if you
We
want
can play that.
if you want to play that, it's
You'll have to
there. That's just hit that.
minimize it.
Yeah,
We got it up on the.
yeah. Okay, yeah. We can play that. That's right.
Ebonsea is a holiday resort in the mountains. The air is clean and pure. It cures sickness, and there is a sweetness about the place.
Seen a little more than what I showed you by my still pictures. The thoughts of this camp never leave me. Ebonsea comes back, it comes back. I think the reason, though, that we were able to stand those sights and what we saw there, because the war ended May 8th, 2 days later after we got there. It just seemed like such a relief when that happened. We knew now we're no more active combat. What a relief. So, it's the feeling of knowing that we now are it's a safer place to live, and we probably exist. Because prior to that, as we said earlier, you never knew whether you would see the sunset. On a lot of occasions, there were times when you were off at the front line, in wherever you were, not on outpost, you could rest a bit and maybe write some letters. That's about all we done when we had any relaxation, was think of home. I must tell you what this is, where we're going on with pictures. I should describe these. First off, I want to tell you about Eben. See, I think I have it written down here. The construction of the Ebensee concentration camp started in 1938 by slave labor. The camp was located in the Alp Mountains, and there were 25 interconnecting tunnels dug into the mountains. Now, they dug them by using dynamite, and they would have to have the prisoners haul out all of the rock. That was their daily chore. So, let's see. There were 25 connecting tunnels, and you could go from one to the other. The German V-2 rocket was the reason that's why they started. That the Americans and the English had blown up in the Ruhr Valley, where all the main oil wells and every manufacturing was all destroyed, and they knew they had to have a place to continue, so you could put factories in these tunnels and be protected because we could not hurt them. They were safe. That is the start of another one. Let's go on, as long as we're on this. There's a picture of one of these tunnels. You can see it's about 30 to 35 feet wide, and the height there is about 45 feet, and they go 200 yards deep into the. Let's go to the next one. See what it. Well, you can't tell there, but anyway, the factories was there in that one tunnel that we were in, and I looked at after when I got a chance to go up there. They were making synthetic gasoline in it. The Germans had a lot of synthetic gasoline, and they had to have that because their oil supply, was practically, they were ruined didn't have nothing after the Americans got done with our bombing, which we have to give credit to our bombers, and that's another big story. So much involved in this terrible war. But anyway, they decided that they would not make the V-2 rocket there. They moved it up in north central Germany, and put in these factories so they could produce stuff and keep their trucks and vehicles running and parts. They were really efficient in their own way. So they were still digging those tunnels, and I must tell you, I wrote down, I saw that, I knew they told me that they were starving them. They were given 350 grams of daily rations, which also considered of what they call coffee, but that they've told me it wasn't worth as like drinking dishwater, and that's the way it was kind of described. Then they had a lunch would be, for instance, it would be soup, and turnip soup and potato soup. And 4 times a week, they'd get 20 grams of meat in soup. And of course, the capos that we're talking about got fed real good, because they worked right beside us. They were right on them, and they got good food that was brought into them. The rations would keep a person alive for 3 months. And this is what they wanted to do. That was their main objective, was to destroy Jewish people. 6 million of Jews were destroyed. The Jewish faith were destroyed. Of those 6 million, there were 1.5 million of children brutally murdered by the Nazis with the most sophisticated technology, but that was developed by the German scientists. It was estimated that at the end of the war, less than 500,000 Jewish people survived the Holocaust in Europe. I think 6 million of them lives were taken. 1.5 million of little children. And it just makes you, I guess, I don't know, I have terrible feelings about it. So that was a climax of my experiences of World War II. Like I told you, I thought the reason we could more or less forget that is the war was ended. General Patton had told us, we had a regiment met near it was just a few miles away from Evansville. He come to talk to us and praise us for what the 3rd Cavalry as a regiment done for his help with his 3rd Army. And he says, now I want you to know I'm going to get you home and you will have a 30-day furlough, and then I'll be glad to lead you in Japan. You will be part of my 3rd Army, just as you were for where you have been for the last 8-9 months. He praised us to know him. When General Patton was a colonel, the rank of colonel, he was in Washington, D.C. Then he kept track of the rest of the way, and he had us picked for his army, and he told us that. So, really, he was a wonderful general. And I can only say that I'm just glad to serve with him. If I was going to serve with anybody, he was a man I wanted to follow. There was a lot of men that thought the same way. You've heard of old blood and guts Patton, but those men that mentioned that talked like that, to me, they were men that weren't frontline soldiers. I know there was times you didn't want to go on these certain missions, but you had to do it, and we knew that. And he stressed that. So we were proud, and we were all proud of the 3rd Army and what we had done. That's my story. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, if I could.
As teachers, I mean, we all get a chance to teach World War II.
Yes.
What would be the one thing that you'd want us to make sure we get across to the students about World War II?
Well, the Holocaust. That was a main, destroying people like that. You saw how this slow death and work to death. Let me tell you, Austria is a small country, but in that country was 49 concentration camps. And Mauthausen, there's a little town called Mauthausen. Mauthausen was the mother camp of all of the 48 other ones. Evansville was a sub-camp. And most all of those prisoners you saw, a lot of them come from Dachau and the other camps, but most of them, all the other ones come through Mauthausen, and they were shipped to the sub-camps. And Evansville was one of the worst death camps going because they worked people to death. Some other camps was just, you were automatically a death camp. In Poland, that's the way Auschwitz was, no, the man I pointed out to you, he was in Auschwitz. That's where he served his time. Max Garcia, the man that I give a cigarette to, had been in Austria. He was born in Amsterdam. His name is Garcia, and you wonder how a Jew can be named Garcia, but in 1492, in Spain, if you were a Jew, you had to adopt a Spanish name. Otherwise, I don't know what they'd done, but that was in 1492. So he was born in Amsterdam and he had a sister and his mother and father. And he became an architect, and that was as young boy. His father helped him get this, and his schooling was to become an architect. That's how he survived with the Germans in this camp. I told you he was in better condition than what I saw down looking at this mess of humanity. When he got on the tank, he was strong enough to crawl up there. He convinced the Germans that he could build buildings and lay them out, and that's what saved him, and that's what he done. So he was treated very, like he said, I was able to get food, I could get this, and I could talk to men that would help me. So anyway, he lives in San Francisco. He's alive today. Our unit from 1947 to 2009 had an annual reunion, us guys. And Max Garcia found out about us in 1987, and we were having a reunion down where the 3rd Cavalry was at Fort Bliss, Texas, and so Max came there, and we met up. Max and I met again in 1987. I'd never seen him after 45. I didn't know where he went, but then so the man, he appreciated it so much for us saving, but he said we saved his life. Maybe we did. I'm sure we did. Had he been there, nobody come, they would have starved, and they would have all starved to death, worked to death. For his way of thanking us was we were planning to go back. Whoever wanted to go back and just trace our steps across Europe. And he told us at that time he would lead us back and make arrangements for every hotel. He could speak 4 different languages. And he says, I'll have no trouble, you just tell me where you want to go. And he did that. And we were gone for 3 weeks after we got to Europe. And we retraced our steps all the way from Utah Beach in the bus, driving every little town here, because we didn't go no straight line by any means. We got down to Evansy. It was 2,700 miles. And that I couldn't believe it. Here we rode a tank that far. And anyway, a lot of miles. Max is alive today, lives in San Francisco. His wife passed away about 8 years ago now. But he's been a wonderful friend of our troopers. And we surely appreciated him. We have, in our times of reunions, we had gotten at least acquainted with maybe 20, 25 of those ex-prisoners who live here in the States now. And they came to our reunions. We always had some of those survivors at our reunions, and they were part of a highlight of our reunion. I myself I was invited back to Austria in 2005. That was 60 years, I think, yeah, it was a 60-year anniversary of the liberation of the camp. And they I had to speak and tell about how it was, what we run into. You know what, we missed pictures of the gate there that, I don't know, can we go back, or you want to see that?
Yeah.
Let's go slow here. They have to.
Were they further along in the
Yeah,
slideshow?
yeah, they are. I'm sure they are. Let's keep going. Oh, that's back the other way.
Go,
We gotta
go.
go. We gotta go the other way. I wanted to show you the gate. Well, there's some pictures. Those pictures, we didn't talk about those. It's just you get the
Want me to hit
lights.
the lights, or?
Yeah, it'll be a little better for you to see. That's a cross there, a memorial made there. Just a cross is within that. Those are memorials every year, May 6th. All of those survivors, a lot of those survivors of those prisoners come to Evansville. And that's why I was there in 2005. Every fifth year they had a special reunion. So those are memorial markers, and there's all kinds of things in the letters and things that you could read about the families. And let's go to the next one.
I have to go. I'm very sorry.
Oh.
I just want to say I really, really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad you come and to
Yeah,
see this.
and I just want you to know that a lot of kids are going to see this.
Oh, I hope
They will, and adults
Yeah.
too. But I'm going to have at least, well, at least 80 kids that'll see it, and it's going to be, it'll be really important to us. So thank you very, very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I had
That's
to, but I had
fine,
to say
that's fine.
thanks, and I have to go. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, let's
Thanks,
go
Dan.
on. There's some more memorials, and there is the
The gate.
entrance to this camp. Now, can you imagine behind there now is all of these homes? And when I spoke to them in 2005, I said that was sacred grounds. How in the world can you, why are these homes here? I didn't realize that, because in 1990, that's when I saw them. And up here is where that light fixture was, right there. It's where the bracket came out.
So those are actual houses that people live in?
Yeah, they're living there now today.
And
Now,
that's right where the concentration camp
Yes, yes. Let me tell you, it's set up there in the mountains for about 20 years. And it was just deteriorating. And a group of people said, we are going, and as beautiful as that area is, and they had improved the roads up there and around there, they made up their mind they were going to clean that camp all out and build these homes. And they did. That's why I said it's such sacred grounds. How could you even think of living here? How could you sleep at night knowing what was there? A lot of people didn't know that. Of course, now, as years go by, they didn't realize that. Now let's go to the next picture. I think there's that home, same home, a little closer. But that's where we went through, and there was two big wooden gates there. And of course, all of a sudden, the whole thing, wire fences here, and the towers, that's all taken down, of course. But you could see the steep mountains going right straight up, and what a beautiful area to live in, if you didn't have that memory or we knew what was there. Let's go on now to another one. Oh, we're into another story. This is Mr. Getz, a man that wrote a book. He saw me come in and saw the tank turn the corner. He wrote a book about seeing this. I was up in my tour. We weren't buttoned up then. And he lives in California. He's an optometrist. He went to a camp where after the war where they sent him in Italy, and I can't think of the name of what they called the camps, but anyway, that's where a lot of these people went to try to recover and revive and get ready for the rest of their life. And he did. He couldn't speak English. So he went to Italy, and he met a woman there who had an uncle that lived in Los Angeles. So when I went back there in 2005, he invited me. He stayed in Los Angeles, but he had a friend that was coming to an ex-GI that was coming to this occasion. He gave him this business card, and this guy gave me this card. When I got home, I called Sam, and Sam arranged for me to come out there, and we had a great time with the Los Angeles Times. We made that paper, and he wrote a book and told about what it was to see those tanks come in. And these, now let's go to the next picture. Oh, this is a man who lives in San Diego, and I was invited to come down there, and his wife wanted to surprise her husband. His 80th birthday was coming, so she called. And the reason she called me, she had my address and phone number because I had that man's tape as I got it to Washington, D.C. through the Holocaust Museum. And this man was in the concentration camp when we went in there, and he tells me he was waving frantically, so was everybody else, you know. And I couldn't understand him, but what he was trying to do was get our attention to get his brother out amongst those dead bodies that were laying there, because he was unable to get up and work. He was so weak he couldn't, and if you had to lie down and couldn't get up, you were just hit over the head, and now you're done away with. So he got in amongst those dead bodies, and he laid there. He was there for 3 days, 3 nights. And so we had a big birthday party. This is Sam again. Let's go on to the next page, or next picture. Oh, this is Max Saflower. He's an ex-prisoner. He lives in Stockholm, Sweden. When I was there in 2005, he was there. In the meantime, he'd been relocated in Sweden, and that's where he was. And so he arranged for he and his that lady that was involved in the stories of the concentration camps got in touch with me, and so my wife and I got a trip to Stockholm and then 2 other big cities in Sweden at no charge, but to tell the story that I've told you today. And we went together to 2 other cities. Okay, let's go to the next picture. Maybe there he is. This is Lou Duntz, an ex-prisoner, lives in San Diego. So his wife arranged this party. She was going to have it in her home, and then all the family and everybody, she got word of this. There's too many people coming. So she got the hotels, the DoubleTree Hotel in San Diego, for our meeting, and I was to be the surprise guest to him, because he saw me, and then he didn't, of course, know that I was coming. So let's go to the next picture. There is a big celebration. Then see, you had this picture of my tank here where you saw earlier. They had that up, and then they had one of the judges of the Nuremberg trial there. What an occasion. Let's go. I think I've got it more. I'm not sure.
What this list?
Oh, there's the last one. That's me now in 45 compared to the picture you saw earlier. That yellow scarf that we had around our head. By the way, cavalry colors are yellow and green, and we did run into a big warehouse that had all kinds of materials, this kind of stuff, and a carom ring. You see, that's what I got around it, my neck, holding it together. And so we wore that because of the dust. The tank stirred up tremendous dust from the engines or dirt. So it was just, we all wore them. We all took a big amount of them. Part of our uniform, Western American uniform, but we used them. And so.
When you look at that picture at the beginning,
Yeah.
and you look at this one,
Yeah.
and you think about the war, I mean, how did the war change you?
How did it change me?
If you had to sum it up, how
Well,
did it change you?
Oh, for a long time, I guess I couldn't forget that war. You know, Ebensee, I come back, one of the most horrible things I ever saw in my, never. None of us were ever exposed to anything like that. I couldn't even tell that to my mother. I told her of the concentration camp, and I just left it there, I couldn't talk about it because nobody here really knows what I was talking about. I wouldn't believe you if you told them. At that time when we first got home. No, I guess they've had it in the papers and all that, but that little town of Marengo, Illinois over here, 25 miles east, they 2,500 people in it. And that was my home, you know. And of course, at that time, then all of my friends, my buddies were coming back. There were a few of them that never made it out of Marengo. The man that I went to Camp Grant with, he got killed the first day in action. Fred Engel was his name. I come back when I got back to the States, I went to see his father and mother and told them about how that could how it happened, as I knew it, and what kind of hank he was in and all of that. Yeah, so like I say, we had to go back to work. You couldn't. There was, you know, we went through the Depression, and nobody's going to give you nothing. My mother refused relief. She absolutely refused relief. I sent every dime I got from my paycheck, when I got paid from the Army, I sent it right home. I never, even went to the town, that pretty big city, Augusta, Georgia. I never went to that city, only on an Army maneuver. We were taken to a big lake there and shown how there was an Army duck, it was a vehicle that you could go in water with, and you could drive it. Same thing, you could drive it right out. It's called the Army Ducks. They're up at Wisconsin up here. They're used, I think, even today. But I got home and I had to make a living. So glad to be home. That was the main thing.
Remember that first day back home?
Huh?
You remember the first time you walked back home?
Yeah, come back to Rockford. My sister, the one that was living, she would, when wartime, when it broke out, when I went to service, she was in Keokuk, Iowa. And she was home, and she came to Rockford to meet me. And that was my, of course, meeting her and then driving to Marengo. Yeah, it was great to be back. I was so thrilled and tickled to think that we didn't have to go to Japan. I was home on furlough, and they dropped that atomic bomb. Oh, Christ. The war ended, you know, after the second one. I had gone back then, and they just gave me another 2-week home because every plans had all changed. But at that time, I was back to Fort Camp Carson, not Carson, in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and that's where I got discharged from the service. But when we first got back there, we had to start getting ready for preparations for overseas movement again. Going on rifle ranges and firing ranges, and we all knew that was just a joke. And our captain, instead of taking 15 tanks out on the range, why we just take one tank and fire the ammunition that we were supposed to fire, and we came back, cleaned the gun. That was just going through the motions, but there was no reason to, because the war was ending. We were treated very well, and I guess we deserved to be, because there was nothing to fight for at that time. The war was over, and so we're ready to come home. I would have stayed in the Army. I liked the Army, but my mother was home. My 2 brothers were in the Navy. They were still in the Navy. So she was sitting there with my youngest sister, living at home, trying to make a living, washing clothes, doing anything she could do to help. So I was just glad to be home. And so from there on, I just started work again. I worked till I retired in 1988. I've enjoyed my life. I've enjoyed all those reunions that we had. I probably, out of those 62 reunions, I probably attended half of them, maybe all over the country we went. So, I guess that's my story. And,
Well, we
and I must say this, I was only one little peon out of 16 million men and women that were in World War II. 16 million, this thing. For every combat soldier at that time, they told us it took 11 people behind us for whatever, you know, to prepare everything. It took 11 servicemen. A lot of people were in limited service. I suppose that's what made up a lot of them. I know that. There were a lot of but for every active combat soldier, there was 11 men or women backing them up. So it was quite an experience in my life. I probably, had I not gone in that concentration camp, I probably would have forgotten and more or less let step aside like so many World War II veterans that are around today. They don't talk about it. But in my case, I think I should tell everybody about that, and children especially, that there was such a thing as those terrible concentration camps in the Holocaust in Europe, not counting what happened in Japan and the islands and all of that. So, I hope it's been informative. Thank
You
you.
Oh, absolutely.
Perfect timing.
Okay.
Right at